Thanks for listening to this interview from Peaks Island Radio. I'm Chris, the founder and the owner of the station. We feature a wide variety of programming, from interviews like this one to specialty music programs by island volunteers and recordings of live events. If you'd like to check out some of our programming, please visit peaksislandradio.com. You can listen live or browse the archives. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Dimow, a renowned Maine musician and instructor. Carl tells us about his band Choro, Louco. They're performing at the New Bracket Church on May 13th at 7 p.m. The final show in the Long Winter's Night concert series, brought to you by Peaks Highland House Concert Series, New Bracket Church, and Peaks Island Radio. We talk about the origins of Choro music, Carl's other musical passions, and his longtime association with Peaks Island. All right, well, it's a real pleasure to have you, Carl, here talking about the upcoming concert for the Long Winter's Night concert series, which luckily it seems like that's in the past. Now we're turning the corner solidly into spring in May.
Yeah, it finally feels that way.
Yeah. So before we begin talking about your event out here on the island, I did want to touch briefly on the fact that you were the Casco Bay Tumblers as well, and you're not a stranger to Peaks Island. Is that right?
That is completely true. I've been playing with the Casco Bay Tumblers for over 30 years. And I've performed on Peaks with the Tumblers a number of times, and I'm close friends with Nancy Three, who I'm sure many of your, if not most of your listeners would know, and I was also very close friends with Julie Goel, who was a long time member of the Casco Bay Tumblers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, people that listen to the station often hear some tumblers during our local music set. So every hour or two, we play something local that's been recorded. And one of the CDs that I have that I play on the station is a Tumblers CD. So folks are definitely, are hearing your music. And of course, we're familiar with Nancy as well.
Yeah. No, the Tumblers is my longest running project. You know, it's I'm in my early 70s, and God, it's nearly half my life I've been playing in that band. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so that is one type of traditional ethnic folk music that I think we'll touch on again in a little bit. But we're here to talk primarily about the music that's going to be coming out to Peaks on May 13th. It's the Choro Louco band, another band that you're involved with. Could you tell me a little bit about that band?
Yeah, so Choro, just very briefly, is a traditional music style, primarily instrumental music style from Brazil. And I'll start rambling here and just cut me off. I'm getting too detailed, but the word choro is actually Portuguese for cry or lament. But the music is quite, a lot of it is quite joyful. This music originated in the late I guess it was late 19th century. And was quite popular throughout the first half of the 20th century. It got kind of overwhelmed a bit by the bossa nova craze, but it's still going quite strongly in Brazil and all around the world. And this band, I play flutes and guitar. Flute, bass, flute, and guitar are my main instruments. And there's another flutist, Nicole Rabata, who also plays in Choro Louco with us. And Nicole and I started this band. Nicole and I go way back. She was actually one of my students when she was young, like 12, 13 years old. But she's an incredible musician. She has a master's in classical flute performance and has done a lot of orchestral playing and classical playing and chamber music. She's also a stellar Irish musician and has toured around Europe and lived in Ireland performing Irish music for quite some time. But Nicole and I are quite close friends and colleagues at this point. And a number of years ago, it's probably 8 or 9 years ago, we started talking about doing a music project together. And flute is one of the primary instruments in Choro music, and we both love the music, so we decided to start a Choro band, um, and reached out to a number of other musicians in the area, and the membership has changed somewhat over time, but we have a core group that will be coming out to the island with. It's me and Nicole, and David Newsom plays 8-string guitar and 10-string mandolin in this band. David's an incredible string player. He's been teaching guitar at Berklee College in Boston for, I think, 35 years or so.
Wow.
And is also teaches guitar at University of New Hampshire. And he's incredibly versatile. I do jazz gigs with him also. We have a jazz quartet. And he plays jazz, he plays choro, he plays classical guitar. He's got an incredible guitar collection. We did a duo concert at Berklee a number of years ago, pre-pandemic. And David he played 6-string guitar, 7-string guitar, 8-string guitar, 10-string guitar, and mandolin on that concert. So with the Choro band, the traditional bass instrument is in this music is a 7-string guitar, and David plays an 8-string, so he's using the 8-string in this music, and that'll be featured on mandolin on a number of pieces. And on percussion, we have Eric Laperna, who's plays a Brazilian tambourine that's called a pandero, and Eric is a remarkable percussionist. He actually plays sometimes with the tumblers. Our regular set drummer is Peter McLaughlin, who many of your listeners may also know. He lives on Peaks also.
Absolutely.
And when Peter can't make it, and for certain other gigs, we have Eric on hand percussion. Eric is best known in Maine and Portland area for his incredible skills as a Middle Eastern musician. He plays dumbek and rek, which is an Egyptian tambourine, and is also quite skilled on the nai, which is the Middle Eastern flute. So just another stellar musician.
One of the things that struck my interest when you were talking about the members is that Nicole was a student of yours. What is your sort of relationship to music teaching? Are you a professor of music, or is it something that you've always just done private lessons for?
I've spent my life teaching lessons on flute and guitar. And the flute was all private lessons in my home studio. Though I did actually I taught for over 20 years at Waynfleet in Portland. And I taught guitar for 36 years at Colby College.
Wow.
Just all different styles of guitar music. And yeah, Nicole was one of my students when she was young, and she's actually the flute faculty at Colby now. I've retired from Colby, but there were a number of years that we were colleagues up there, both teaching at Colby. It was during those years that we decided to start this Choro band.
Mm-hmm. They always say that Maine is such a small state, and there's very few degrees of separation. But it's incredible to me that you wound up teaching as a colleague with a former student of yours.
Yeah, it's when I got hired to teach at Colby, there was actually I got hired to teach guitar, but there was a a woman, Jean Rosenblum, who's retired from music now. She's got a number of years on me. But Jean had been one of my flute teachers. She was the flute teacher at Colby.
Hmm.
And she was one of the people who recommended me when I got hired at Colby.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's Maine is a small town, and then the the collection of Maine musicians is even smaller and tighter. It's like everybody knows everybody else.
So tell us a little bit more about Choro music for folks that don't know. I understand its origins in Brazil. When I think of Brazil, I think of a very multi-ethnic country, and I'm wondering if there are, multiple influences that resulted in Choro.
Yeah, there are. It's really it really sprang up. It's kind of similar to the way blues and jazz originated in the United States. There were the early roots of Choro, kind of combined musical styles from Europe and Africa, but just came up with a different sound in Brazil than what evolved in the U.S. And so the early years of Choro, it was a very informal musical style, but around the turn of the 20th century, a number of different composers, particularly a piano composer, Ernesto Nazareth, started composing some set choros. And then there was a French composer, Darius Milhaud, who was ambassador to Brazil in the I think in the 19 teens, and he was really captivated by Choro music and wrote quite a bit of music that was influenced by Choro. And the great Brazilian composer Heitor Villa-Lobos, who's known for writing orchestral works, piano works, a lot of classical guitar music, he also wrote a lot of Choro. But the music kind of continued as kind of can't think of the word here, just a popular music style. So there were these various composers who were composing music in that style, but then there were a lot of popular music, Choro bands. In the 1930s and 40s, there was a flutist and saxophonist named Pixinguinha, who composed a lot of really beautiful tunes for Choro. We'll be doing a number of his tunes. And then there was in the 1950s and 60s, there was an incredible mandolin player. His name was Jacob Bittencourt, but he was known as Jacob de Bandolim. The bandolim is the Brazilian mandolin. And so he was known as Jacob of the mandolin. And he wrote an incredible set of Choro tunes and did some amazing recordings. And those were the first Choro recordings I heard. David Grisman, the great American mandolin player, put out in the 1990s. He put out a couple of reissue recordings of Jacob de Bandolim's recordings, and that was what introduced a lot of American musicians to Choro music. And when I first heard those recordings, I immediately was captivated and transcribed one of those tunes. This was back in probably the late 90s, before I had any idea of starting a Choro band myself. Just wanted to learn one of those tunes.
So were you into mandolin music at that time? Were you into American bluegrass and then discovered it because of That sort of.
No, no, it's actually bluegrass is one of the styles of music that I barely play, and I
Mm.
don't play mandolin. But I think a friend of mine just played these recordings for me, and I was just kind of stunned that at how beautiful they were. Um, so yeah, the recordings featured mandolin, but anyway, it was just what got me excited about the music, and quite a few other. It's possible that Joel Eckhouse is another musician around Portland who was a member of Choro Loco for most of the history of the band, and he retired from the band during the pandemic. He decided to let it go. Um, but it's possible that it was Joel and I are good friends, and he does play mandolin. He was playing mandolin. He plays mandolin, tenor banjo, a lot of stringed instruments, and it's very possible that it was Joel who introduced me to the Jacob de Bandolim recordings.
Mhm. Yeah, there's nothing like a friend sharing music to help inspire,
Yeah, yeah,
frankly,
totally.
a 30-year obsession.
Yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah,
certainly been down that road myself.
yeah.
It strikes me that and we touched on this earlier, you're both in a band that plays Choro music or, Brazilian folk music to
Right.
some extent or jazz, and then also klezmer music from the Ashkenazi tradition and from Eastern Europe. I'm wondering if you've given any thought to why that sort of music appeals to you.
Um, I play a lot of jazz also,
Mm.
and I'm trained as a classical flutist, and I do a lot of experimental kind of avant-garde projects, and so I definitely I'm definitely interested in ethnic music of from a lot of different traditions, but I'm also just a very eclectic musician, and I just follow my muse and my heart, and if something interests me, I kind of go down that road for a while and see what happens with it.
How about the other folks in the band? Did you all have a common interest in this, or was it just that you had known each other through these other sort of avenues, and then you came together around this sort of music?
Well, like I said, Nicole and I were both interested in Choro music, and or we were interested in starting a band together, and we both knew there's a lot of flute features in Choro music, and it sounds great on flute. So we're like, yeah, let's start a Choro band.
Mhm.
And I knew Joel was interested in the music, Joel Eckhouse, and it was we actually had a bass player playing with us for a number of years before David Newsom, who's the 8 string guitar player, was living in New Hampshire and moved up to Portland. I didn't know him. He moved up to Portland. His wife got a job here. That was probably 6, 7 years ago. Um, and someone told me about him. A mutual friend told me about him, and he was already playing some Choro music with musicians in Boston,
Mm.
and was really excited to find out that there were some people playing Choro up here. Um, and David has since moved back to New Hampshire, but he and so we sometimes use a bass player when he can't make it to a concert. But our preferred lineup is the quartet with him on 8 string guitar,
Mhm.
and then our percussionist Eric. I just asked Eric. I knew him from playing klezmer, and I've also done Middle Eastern music with Eric, and I knew he'd be great in this music, and asked him if he was interested, and he was familiar with the music, and he was actually like, "Wow, it's a very Eric is a true virtuoso on hand percussion, but he was actually a little intimidated about playing this music because it's a different hand technique than what's involved in playing a Middle Eastern uh, uh, tambourine.
So I want to circle back to a comment that you made before too, and then also because you had talked about your interest in jazz as well, where you said that in some ways, Choro was a blending of European and African music, just in a different way in Brazil. And I'm wondering, I heard you mention a lot of composers and people that did orchestral arranging being involved with Choro. Was there that? Was there another side of Choro too that has a lot of improvisation or anything resembling American jazz?
Yeah, the improvisation varies. Um, there are definitely there are bands that it's kind of similar to klezmer music in that they're bands that play the tunes kind of the way they were recorded, and then there are bands that really stretch out on the tunes, and we do somewhat of a mix of both in
Mhm.
our band. Um, and the recordings of Jacob de Bondelim, he definitely improvised over the tunes, but from what I've read about him, his improvisations were kind of set. He would kind of play the melody, and then he had kind of a set variation that he would do.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's definitely some improvisation.
And do you think that that's something that'll be featured out here on Peaks? Do you have any plan to either stick with the way it was written or to sort of branch out? Any idea?
Yeah, we'll be doing a little bit of both.
Hmm.
Um, so some traditional tunes with minimal variations, some traditional tunes with more variation. We'll actually be doing one Choro tune that I wrote,
Oh, neat.
um, and yeah, it'll be just and there'll be tunes that feature flute, tunes that feature mandolin, um, tunes that feature bass flute. Um, we'll be doing one guitar duo, just two classical guitars. Um, a beautiful piece written by a contemporary Brazilian choro musician and composer named Ginga. A very beautiful tune. So yeah, it'll be a wide mix of sounds and tunes. There's a waltz, there's some fast tunes, there's a slow ballad, just a lot of variety.
And so you've mentioned a couple of people already, both Jacob de Bandoline and then Kinga, a more recent or contemporary person. But if people go to this concert and they say, "Wow, I love Choro and I really want to take the next step. I want like the 202 on Choro," who should they listen to? Who should they pull up in their playlist?
Yeah, I would start out with Jacob de Bondelim. So that's Jacob. Do means of, and Bondelim it's like a band, Bandolim.
Mhm.
So Bondelim. A very funny story. You were asking me before we started how to pronounce my name, which is pronounced
Mhm.
Dimow and spelled Dim. But the Portuguese pronunciation for I am is im, like the great bossa nova composer Antonio Carlos Jobim,
Mhm.
and and there's a I sent the one Choro tune I wrote. I sent it to a band in Sao Paulo, who I had like a tenuous connection with. I just sent it to them to see if they'd be interested in it, and they ended up performing it on a live stream
Oh wow.
from Brazil, which was really cool for me. And the
Mhm.
funniest thing was that they pronounced my name perfectly. Um, they were like, Carl Dimow. And they were like, oh, I hope we didn't mispronounce your name.
That's great. You were meant for this music.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, Carl, for sharing your passion with us in this interview and coming out to Peaks to share your music on May 13th. We're looking forward to the concert.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks so much for your interest in this and for letting other people know about the concert.
For more on Carl, check out the show notes at peaksoundradio.com/Carl, C-A-R-L, or the description in your podcast app of choice. If you have suggestions for an interview or are thinking about hosting your own program, email me at chris@peaksoundradio.com.